I'm back again, and this time I didn't go on extended vacation. Well, after the first list that of the year that I missed, why don't we go on to the next year that I missed, 2017. As I've stated before, again, this list will help me catch up on the years that I've missed and everything else that I need to do, and just it helps me a lot. I see you've returned. Ah, yes. Critic. Last time I checked, I killed you off. Did you kill me off, or did the apprentice? What do you mean? Who am I speaking to right now? The writer or the character? I don't know, I guess, I'm wearing the suit, so I guess I'm classy? Tell me the real reason why you left. Like I said before, it was just an extended vacation. It was nothing really too bad. The truth is, you can't separate the writer from the character, can you? It became too much. You want to end this, don't you? No. I feel more invigorated more than ever before to make my reviews this time. Just remember, if you leave, you have to leave for good. You have to hang up that jacket. Nobody wants to watch someone who's not fully in it. Okay. My work here is done. On to the list, I guess. Number 10. Kong, Skull Island. When a man wants to prove that monsters exist, he will take a ragtag team with him to a mysterious island. To their dismay, they are now the bottom of the food chain. Directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts, written by Dan Guillory, Max Bornstein, and stars Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson, and John Goodman. You will see who the true king is in this film. Again, carrying on with the theme from last time, we got big old fat kaijus fighting. As I said before, I'm a huge fan of kaiju films, so this definitely fits into that. I think where Kong Skull Island really works for me is that it's just an adventure film, which is something that we get very rare. It's the film where you have this group of people, each of them does something differently, and they just go on this weird, wacky adventure. This is basically one of those films, and we very rarely get those nowadays. I think all the actors do it for me in this film also. I think everybody's on point and does exactly what they're supposed to. I also think whenever it comes to King Kong himself, the CGI is actually really good. There was only some areas where I felt like it was a little dodgy, but most of all, it didn't really hinder anything for me. Also, how this film was shot was gorgeous. This film obviously takes inspiration from Apocalypse Now, and it's just, there are multiple shots that you can see that are basically the homages to Apocalypse Now, and I felt like that was a very unique style for the movie that we really haven't seen for these kaiju films. Because in the end, every kaiju film kind of looks the same-ish. They aren't shot in very special ways, it's just more of like very generic shots, and then whenever it comes to the actual kaiju, it's very big monster battles. But I think this movie does work for me. It's so low on my list for the main reason of I felt like, comparatively speaking, it doesn't have the most groundbreaking elements or story elements in it, but I still had so much fun with it. Number 9. SpiderMan Homecoming. Spider-Man is back, and after the events of Civil War, he will be tested by a new foe, the Vulture, to see how much of an Avenger he can really be. Directed by John Watts and stars Tom Holland and Michael Keaton. Truly the Spider-Man we wanted and needed. I'm gonna say this right off the bat. I did not hate the Amazing Spider-Man movies. In fact, I actually liked them way better than the Sam Raimi movies. But that's just a personal taste of mine because there's a lot of stuff in the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies that kind of just rubs me the wrong way. Like, no offense to Tobey Maguire, but he's not really the Spider-Man I imagine. That's where Andrew Garfield, he does fill that void. He is very much the Spider-Man that I wanted. But speaking of that, Tom Holland, I feel like, is a perfect in-between of Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield. He's able to portray this very, like, nerdy, but also very scientific type kid. And he can also do the very cocky, very, like, cool guy of Spider-Man. He balances the character very, very well. I think another reason why I really like this is because it actually has a very engaging villain. The villain played by Michael Keaton is just a very sympathetic villain, and he does a very good job of showing that if you mess with him, it's going to be bad for you. I also really like it because him and Spider-Man have a very personal struggle with each other. Whenever you go about halfway through the film, there's a twist that actually connects them together, and I actually didn't see it coming, and it's really, really good. I think my only gripes about this movie are probably the location settings. I know that we've had 3 Spider-Man franchises in the past, so they wanted to do something different, so instead of just him slinging around New York, he's slinging around a neighborhood, he's slinging around airplane. He's slinging around Washington, D.C. But I think that's my only personal gripe of that. Because of how many Spider-Man that we've had, this one couldn't be the full Spider-Man that it wanted to be, because audiences would have complained that we've already seen this before. But I feel like we should have seen it, but that really doesn't take away from what we got. I also really like the look of this movie. There's like several images in my head that I can definitely remember. I remember Spider-Man's old suit. I remember him in the new suit with the yellow jacket on. I remember what the Vulture looks like. It's a very well-designed movie, I think. I also think when it comes to the climax that it was actually very exciting. So it wasn't like very predictable of just flying and swinging around and trying to attack each other. It was actually really, really good. I also really, really love that Robert Downey Jr. is in this movie, because without the whole Uncle Ben thing, we kind of needed a mentor for him. So Robert Downey Jr. fills that, and I think he does an amazing job. I think this is definitely the best Spider-Man that we're gonna get.
Number 8.
The Lego Batman movie. Batman is back in his first solo movie after the Lego movie and finds out maybe going solo wasn't the best idea. Directed by Chris McKay, written by Seth Grahame-Smith, Chris McKenna, and stars Will Arnett and Zach Galifianakis. This movie is definitely built for DC fans everywhere. I had so much fun with this film. As proven by the Lego movie, that studio can really do no wrong almost. It's just they can take any property and it makes it fun. They obviously took their best character from the Lego movie and just gave him his own movie, and it's just a delight. It's amazing, it's fun, it's colorful. There's actually some heart put into there. It's just an overall really good film. There's really nothing I can really go in depth talking about, because the animation is amazing, just like the Lego movie. I think my only gripe with the entire movie is that Joker he's a very comical character, yes, but he doesn't have that edge to him, I guess, that makes the Joker. But it does still work in this world. I would have just thought it would have been more funny if you took someone who's like all serious and like super like dark and creepy, and you put him in this bright, colorful world. I think that would have been really funny. But overall, the movie's it's just a lot of fun. I think it's for everybody. I think it's for people who aren't really big fans of DC. It's definitely for people who are fans of DC. It's for Lego fans. It encompasses everything about the film, and it's just amazing.
Number 7.
Justice League. When a new threat comes to Earth, Batman must put together a team of unlikely heroes to fight it. But will it be enough? Directed by Zack Snyder, written by Chris Terrio and Zack Snyder, and stars Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot, and Henry Cavill. This time, justice is served. Now here we go again. How dare you put a DC film over a Marvel film? How dare you? But in the end, I really liked Justice League. I think this movie gets a lot of unnecessary hate just because I have a really good feeling that a lot of people are still riding the bandwagon of that anything DC makes is the worst thing ever. But in the end, I think Justice League is this perfect blend of how you can get this dark, gritty universe, but also have the lighter sides of it. I think everybody does really well in this movie. All the actors do an amazing job. I think my only, real gripe about it is that this movie kind of just came and went. It was advertised, but as soon as it hit theaters, it kind of just left. I feel like out of all the DC movies, people remember the other ones more rather than this one, because I think people felt like it was just in the middle. It was it wasn't good, but it also wasn't bad, so it's just a meh movie. But I think that's overlooking kind of the themes and and how heroes help people. I think one of the best scenes out of the entire movie is when Batman is talking to the Flash, and he's trying to give him a pep talk, and he's like, just save one person. That's all you have to do. Just save one person. And that means a lot, because it's saying that if he can save that one person, he'll want to save more. And I think that's just an amazing kind of theme of heroes. Obviously, I think the biggest complaint about this movie is the villain, the CGI, and the different directors. First of all, the villain, I think, yeah, he's very weak, but it's not about the villain. It's about the Justice League. It's in their name. And I think it works for its benefit of that they need someone to defeat. They need someone to rally to defeat this villain, and I think it works that way. On the other hand, the CGI is not so subtle in this movie sometimes. There are some shots where you can definitely tell the CGI is not nearly as polished as it could be, especially for some of the scenes with the villain, some of the scenes where Henry Cavill has obviously CGI'd his face, stuff like that. But there are also some CGI stuff that people didn't even really notice, because people apparently forgot that Gal Gadot did a lot of the reshoots for this movie pregnant, and nobody's complaining about that. They could see that, and so it's just kind of a coin flip. And obviously the biggest thing is that this movie had two directors technically. You had Zack Snyder, who made it, and then he had to leave for personal issues, and Joss Whedon, who is most famously known for the Buffy series and the Avengers. The reason why people had issues with this is because this can make the film feel a little Frankenstein-y. You can definitely see where the Zack Snyder bits are and the Joss Whedon bits are. They're very two different styles. But I think I only had that issue once or twice, and it never really dragged the film down for me. Again, I think this movie gets a lot of unnecessary hate, and that's why it's so... It's right where it needs to be on my list. Not in the top 5, but definitely in the inner top 10.
Number 6.
Coco. Miguel loves music, but his family doesn't. He soon takes a trip to the land of the dead to find his great-grandfather, who did love music. Directed and written by Lee Unkrich and stars Anthony Gonzalez, truly a movie worth remembering. So I know I made my statement in the last video that a lot of Disney's main movies, especially nowadays, don't do it for me, and I go to Pixar instead. Well, here's another example of a really good film. They came out with Zootopia, and then they came out with this one, and it's really good. I don't think it's nearly as good as Zootopia, but it just does something. I've always been a fan of the Day of the Dead type of art style, and this movie just, it ravishes itself into it. I think this movie is just, it's about family, and it definitely sticks with that, and that it's so heartwarming to see everything that happens. I think Miguel is truly a very interesting character because he has flaws. He does not like his family, and he's willing to go meet his great-grandfather, who does love music, and he's rather wanting to be with him rather than his own family, who's still alive. I think that just speaks a lot about the lessons that he learns and everything that he goes through, and it's just really good. Again, though, we have the whole twist villain. I won't say who the twist villain is, but it's very obvious of who the twist villain is. But there's also another twist on that is actually really, really clever, and I did not see it coming. So it's just, it keeps you guessing even whenever you think you know what you've got. I also think the music in this is genuinely heartwarming. There's a certain song in there that it plays at the very beginning, and they very cleverly weave that throughout the entire movie. Of the message of the song is in the movie, and it comes to a very heartbreaking scene near the end, and then it's just one of those things where it's like, that's just clever writing. So I guess in the end, we'll just have to wait and see that if Disney's next animated movie can do it for me again, I guess.
Number 5.
Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is back in her solo origin story in World War I, where she believes she can defeat the war all on her own. Directed by Patty Jenkins, written by Alan Hindenburg, and stars Gal Gadot and Chris Pines. Truly a wonderful period piece. Obviously, I had to put this on my list. I am a DC fan, and this was the one movie that everybody kind of just went like, yeah, that was good. And I would agree with them. This movie is just really solid all the way through. It's got themes of death, of love, of you can't defeat a war all on your own. I also really love that this is set in a period piece, so it's very interesting to see how Wonder Woman's life is, and then you go to the real grittiness of London, and it's just really good. I also think one of the very selling points of this movie is Chris Pine and Gal Gadot's relationship in this movie. It's so excellent and believable, I think, because it's not like he falls in love with her as soon as they meet. It's more of, as they go on this journey together, they're slowly starting to accept who one another are, and they start to fall in love with each other. And I think it's very beautiful, and you very rarely get to see a slow relationship through a movie happen. In the end, I don't really have any gripes with the movie, but I can't really think of anything that's like, I gotta hit it on the head. There is a twist villain, though, and I will say, did not see it coming. Because they're setting up the whole movie who the villain is, and it turns out it is that villain, but it's somebody you didn't expect. So it's very complicated to say, but just go and watch the movie without spoiling yourself, and it'll be a pleasant surprise.
Number 4.
War for the Planet of the Apes. Caesar is back in the final movie to the trilogy, where this time he must pay for the price of war when humans are at the end of their life. Directed and written by Matt Reeves and stars Andy Serkis and Woody Harrelson. A beautiful end to the price of war. So, I was very late to this train. I never saw the first movie, never saw the second movie, but I finally rented them and I watched them, and I instantly fell in love with them. Because going in, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be really my thing. It's just about apes taking over the world. How could that be interesting? Boy, was I flat out wrong. These movies are fascinating because they're more than just prequels to the ape movies. They are character pieces about the singular ape who gained intelligence, Caesar. It's all about Caesar and the world that he's going through. The first movie tackled how you can be different from an ape and a human, and it was just very interesting to see how Caesar dealt with what he is and what he is to humans and all that. And the second movie, which I personally love to death, dealt with, well, whenever you choose a side, you have to pay the price of war. And I think that's really good because Caesar doesn't want war. He just wants the apes to live in peace and not interfere with the humans. But that's also very blurred because there are apes on that side who want to start a war, and then on the human side there are humans who don't want to start a war. And it's very fascinating to see. Obviously, the second movie ends with Caesar starting a full-out war, and here comes War for the Planet of the Apes. War for the Planet of the Apes is definitely not the movie I expected. I think one of my first complaints to start off the bat is that they should have changed the title. I think it should have gone Dawn, and then War, and then Rise, because that would have made more sense. I think they should have called the second one War for the Planet of the Apes, and this one something else. Because in the end, there is no real war until the very, very end of the movie. But while we get there, it's this fascinating character piece on the price you have to pay for starting a war. Because you see Caesar at probably his lowest I've ever seen him. And it's really, really gripping to see that he is suffering for his people, but also the humans are suffering to keep their race alive, and it's just so fascinating. And I think this movie, without spoiling it, it ends on probably the most perfect note it probably could, and I am happily satisfied with this trilogy. I think you don't need to make any more sequels, but if you do, please take it into like a different direction almost, to keep these as this kind of trilogy. I also think that the CGI, you can see it being just like upgraded as the movies go on, because in the first movie the CGI is really good. Second movie, CGI is phenomenal. This movie, it's mind-blowing how the CGI works, because in some shots I'm like, that's just a real animal. That's not CGI, that's a real-looking animal. I love these movies because they're more than just prequels. They are character pieces about a fallen king, and I just love that.
Number 3.
Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And this time, the Resistance is on the edge of defeat, while Rey tries to find Luke, but what she finds goes even deeper than the great Jedi we once knew. Directed and written by Rian Johnson, stars Daisy Ridley and Mark Hamill, a true deconstruction of what Star Wars really means. Now, obviously, there are going to be people being like, how dare you put this movie anywhere on your list? You can't like Star Wars anymore. It's run into the ground. But I was one of the people who actually really, really liked The Last Jedi because it gave me everything that I wanted from Star Wars. Where I think Episode 7 is really good for what it is. It is very much a retread of what we've seen before. I think this movie, it delves into areas that we really haven't delved before into the Star Wars movie. I also think that's why people really hated it, because the movie took you out of your comfort zone. It took you into areas that you never really thought of, and it changed things, and it really lived up to the message of what Star Wars is. I'm going to try to tackle this movie with all the points that people say is wrong and what I think is actually correct, and I'm going to try to tackle them without spoiling the movie, so it's going to be a little mishmash. I think the first thing that I need to touch on is the comedy. People felt like the comedy was very out of place, but then again, this is not very much a big complaint from the people, but I didn't have a problem with the comedy. I felt like it worked because every other Star Wars movie has comedy in it. It's just, you apparently noticed this time. The other big complaint is that there's an entire chunk of the movie that takes place on a new planet, Canto Bight. A lot of people are saying, wow, that was really pointless. Why did we ever go there? The thing that they never thought of is that it's not pointless. The character's going there for a reason, and then they come back for a specific reason. It's just that the reason does not work out in their favor. And I think this is where we come into the biggest complaint about the movie. This movie subverts expectation. Whenever everybody saw Episode 7, they were like, oh, where are they gonna go from here now? And then everybody started putting on their theory hats, and then they made all these theories. It's like, Rey is Obi-Wan's daughter. This is this. Darth Plagueis is the bald guy. When in reality, subverting expectations is actually a really good thing because it surprises you. Tell me, how fun would a Star Wars movie be if you had planned out every single theory correct? It would be the worst, most boring step-by-step movie ever to exist. There wouldn't be any surprises in it at all. And where The Last Jedi succeeds is that it takes everything that you thought you knew and it throws it out and it replaces it with something that's much more interesting. Because the theme of the movie is failure. It is failure through and through. The Resistance are failing. Poe and Rose are failing. Rey and Luke are absolutely failing. And I think that's a very important message, and apparently Star Wars people can't accept that message, that people are human. They fail. And if we just saw people win all the time and had no struggle, it'd be the most boring characters ever to exist. For example, Luke, everybody hates him because they changed how they thought he would be. But in the end, it's about an old hermit person who has given up because he is scared of what he did. He is ashamed of his failure. And I think that's such a beautiful thing because it shows that he is a character. He is full of life, and that he is not boring at all. He's actually the most interesting character in the entire movie because he does stuff that is questionable, but the reason behind it is also not questionable. So it becomes this duality of, well, who's in the right, who is correct. And I think it just shows that characters, whenever they beat the big baddie, their story arc is not over. They have more to learn. They have more to grow. And I think that's a perfect example of what they did with Luke. Because he defeated Darth Vader, and everybody's like, oh, he's just the best Jedi ever. He can't do any wrong anymore. But in the end, he's still human. He has flaws. And I think that's what makes this movie beautiful. Also, this movie in general is just shot beautifully. I think this is probably the best looking Star Wars movie ever to exist. As I said in my past video, that Rogue One was probably the most beautiful Star Wars movie at that point. This one, it just elevates it. It's superb of how amazing it looks. I'm also really sad that J.J. Abrams is taking over Episode 9 because Episode 7 was pretty looking, but it wasn't Last Jedi pretty looking. In the end, I'm just mad because people do not give the credit that is due to what these people did. And I think they really created something interesting, but people didn't want to accept it because it didn't align with what they wanted. And I think that's a real shame for a movie that spreads about failure. And it's just, I love this movie so much. It's truly the best Star Wars movie, I think. I love it so much.
Number 2.
Your Name. When two high school kids start switching bodies, they must find out who one another are, but what they find is much greater than distance. Directed and written by Makoto Shinkai, and stars Mikhail Sinterklaas and Stephanie Shi, a film that shows love can transcend more than distance. Now, I know the first thing that people are going to say is this isn't a 2017 movie. This is 2016. I would say, yes, you're correct, but us people in America didn't get it until 2017. So we are stuck with getting it for 2017 while people got it for 2016. Let me start off with what this movie does right, I think. I think it builds upon what it set up very well. The movie is gorgeous looking. This is probably the best animated movie I've ever seen, period. Either animated in America or Japan. I just think it's gorgeous looking. I also think this probably has the best realistic character development for people because I feel like they're actual high school kids. They don't do anything that I feel like is out of the ordinary or they do stuff that's out of their character. I think it feels like what would actually happen in this situation. I also really love this movie because the setting of it is also gorgeous. You have this stark contrast of this boy living in the big city and this girl living in a country town, and it's very interesting to see how the two collide with each other. I also love the soundtrack to this movie. It's got this very unearthly feel to it, and it's like it's almost like you're dreaming almost. It's not like very hardcore type music. It's very soft and it's gorgeous almost. It's about as gorgeous as the movie is. I think one of the big complaints that people would have about this movie is the runtime. I don't think that's a big complaint because there is a lot. Whenever you figure out more about the story, there's a lot that you have to cover. So I feel like it was willing to do what it had to. Without spoiling the movie, there are a couple twists and turns that I personally did not see coming because I thought I had this movie figured out by the moment I pressed play. And then they threw a couple things at me that were like, okay, we're gonna go in that direction, great. Because I think it just adds to the elements that it sets up and it makes for these very somber moments. This movie isn't afraid to make you cry, and it's just, there's some scenes where it's almost like deathly quiet, some scenes where it just lets the characters be them and do the rest, and you don't need music to help you. And it's just a beautiful, calming movie almost. And I think that's why it shot up so fast on this list, was because it did something that not a lot of other movies could, and I think it's just beautiful. I think it's just gorgeous. And as I did before, let's do our dishonorable mentions.
I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't
Now, let's get on to it. Let's go to number 1.
And number 1.
A Monster Calls. A young boy deals with living with his sick mother and bullies at school, but one night a monster shows up and teaches him the truth of life in 3 stories. Directed by J.A. Bayunia, written by Patrick Ness, and stars Louis McDaniel, Felicity Jones, and Liam Neeson. A story that teaches that life is not as simple as black and white. Now again, we have the same thing. Didn't this movie come out in 2016? Well, no. It came out in indie theaters. We didn't get it for a wide release until early 2017. Basically, with my experience with this movie is I went to go see Kubo and the Two Strings, and this trailer was in front of it. And by the second that I saw the trailer, I was like, wow, that movie looks pretty interesting. I hope that gets a wide release so I can see it. Turns out it did get a wide release for about 3 days. But it was so early in the year that I was like, there'll probably be better movies, and this will probably get knocked down. So I went and saw it, but I saw this movie, and I immediately knew it was my number 1. There was no way anything could beat it, and nothing did. It is my number 1 spot. This movie is truly something else. It's movies that I said before that you get like once in a lifetime. For every Transformer, you get one of these, basically. And it's just... Well, let me start from the beginning, I guess. This movie deals with a lot of heavy themes. It deals with death, depression, and it's just... It does it in a very beautiful way, I think. Because in where a lot of movies, they use death as a very much like, here, take it, cry now, cry. But this movie takes it in a very adult, mature way, and it doesn't feel forced upon you. Actually, it feels very awful that it has to happen, but yet, in the message of the movie, it's just kind of how life works. This movie was rated PG, so kids can go and see it. And I think that's very important, because if I had a kid who was maybe around like 9 or 10, I would let him go see this. Because I think it teaches a very important moral lesson throughout it. That death is a part of life, not everything is the way it seems, nothing is ever black and white. Like, in the 3 stories that the giant tells, they're stories about very harsh issues of, well, you did this, so this has to happen, or this happens, but really, this person was actually bad all along. And it kind of just shows that it's got really heavy themes and messages about life, and it's truly saddening whenever you see what's happening to this kid. I think the actor who plays the main character, he was in Pan originally, and that was his first role, if I'm correct, and he did a good job, but I think this is where he shines. He is phenomenal in this movie. He does an incredible job. Also, Felicity Jones is in this movie. This was her role right before Rogue One, and it's such a stark contrast, because in Rogue One she's kind of this emotionless rebel, but in this movie she's a very emotional, struggling mom, and it's very amazing to see how her like acting chops can be shown off in this movie. I also think the giant is done very well, because giants in movies are very normal for kids to get attached to them. I think it works very well here. It's kind of like the Iron Giant almost. I also think the CGI is incredible in this movie, because it turns out they actually used a lot of practical effects for the giant, but they also did CGI effects for the stuff they obviously couldn't do. I own this movie on Blu-ray, and I remember I watched it pretty recently because I was like, man, that was one of the best movies. I want to know if it still holds up. I watched it again, and man, if it holds up, it holds up, because I was sobbing in my seat, because the first time I watched it, I was crying till the end of the movie, and I watched it again and I was still crying. It's one of those movies that it really hits you, and I just love this movie a lot. I'm really hoping that we get at least one of these types of movies each year, but I may be asking for a lot. But I think for what this movie did, it deserves my number one spot. And I urge anybody who sees this, please go out and watch it. Buy it, rent it, I don't care. Just watch it, because it's an amazing movie. It's something else. It's my number one. And that's my list for the best 2017 movies. I've finally caught up the years that I've missed, so you know what that means. Next time I see you guys, we're going to be reviewing pretty recent movies this year. And remember, stay classy.